Hey everyone, and just like I did my Linux desktop tier list, I think it was last month, it's time to do our Linux distro tier list for 2026. As usual, this is just the distros that I took a look at in the past or recently. I obviously cannot cover every single distro out there. There will be one big missing one, which I'm sure you'll request down in the comments. I'm sure you know the one I'm talking about. Anyway, let's get started right after this message from our sponsor. So this video is sponsored by Joplin. They're an open source note-taking application that focuses on flexibility and privacy. So on Linux we have tons of note-taking apps, but Joplin currently has my preference because they are fully open source and fully private. They are designed to work offline first. Your notes are always available. You don't need an internet connection. You have all the features available without any third-party services. It's also available on all major platforms, Windows, macOS, Android, iOS, and of course Linux, so you can sync your notes between all your devices. You can take notes with rich text, markdown, you can have voice notes, you can have voice dictation, you can add drawings or sketches. And when it comes to syncing your notes, you can just sync the notes that you create through Joplin, but you can also access Joplin Cloud, which is their own service to let you sync stuff between devices. Joplin Cloud allows you to synchronize your notes securely between all your devices. You can try it for free for 14 days, and it also comes with note sharing, collaboration, letting you publish your notes online for documentation, or even completely transfer an email into a note immediately. So if you want a secure, open source and private note-taking application for Linux that syncs everywhere, you have Joplin. The link is down in the description, and you can even use the code LinuxExperiment to get 25% off if you subscribe to their Joplin Cloud plan. So we're going to begin with PopOS, obviously, because they have a big revamp using now the Cosmic desktop instead of the old version of GNOME. PopOS used to be in my no thanks category last year because it was just too old. It was still based on Ubuntu 22.04 LTS. It still used a very old version of GNOME. They did patch a bunch of stuff in terms of the kernel and the drivers, but it just did not give you such a good experience compared to what you could get on other distros. Nowadays, though, you have Cosmic, and you have a newer base. It's still relatively old. It's Ubuntu 24.04 LTS. They will obviously have a release with 26.04 as their base soon, but they now have the Cosmic desktop, and Cosmic isn't fully fleshed out, in my opinion, not yet for me at least. It still lacks a bunch of things that would make the experience more enjoyable. We talked about it in the desktop tier list, go check that out if you want. But now it has a clear vision, it has a clear product that they're now pushing. I would expect the next major version of Cosmic and of PopOS to be more interesting. You will get a newer base, you will get a lot more features, but PopOS right now has a lot more to offer than it did the last time we did this tier list, before they used Cosmic and with their super old GNOME version. So I think now PopOS moves into the good category. It's a good distro. If you can overlook the fact that it's not really animated as a desktop, it's still very much a first iteration. It's still a very good distro these days with up-to-date internals, because they do update the kernel, the drivers and all that stuff, and a solid desktop with a clear roadmap and a lot of work being poured into it. Now we're gonna move on to elementaryOS. It used to be in the average category, and now I'm placing it in the good category. I felt previously they were a bit too slow to catch up to the likes of GNOME, to the likes of KDE with their desktop, and the distro itself is basically just Ubuntu LTS with their desktop on top of it. But now the desktop is really good, and it has moved on to Wayland fully, which is really cool. They added a bunch of features, they are revamping the look and feel, they have a bunch more options than they did, and while the app ecosystem is no longer the best out there, it used to be a while back, now it's GNOME's app ecosystem. You can use GNOME apps in elementaryOS, they don't really feel out of place, they're not themed like elementary apps, but they do look pretty good and they integrate well with the elementaryOS human interface guidelines. I think elementaryOS is a very good distro these days. Of course, you have to like their desktop, but if you like it, it's probably the best place to run it. Now let's talk about Arch Linux. Now this is a jack of all trades. It is fine on its own. It is also very good as a base for plenty of other Linux distributions. It is nowadays much easier to install than it once was. You have plenty of installers that you can run if you don't want to do the whole setup manually. It makes things a lot easier, although it is still a badge of success to have installed Arch the real way, but I think that's kind of nonsense. Unless you really want to learn how things work, you can just use the graphical thing and it's going to run well. Now, Arch is still not my favorite distro. Fully rolling releases aren't really for me. I've been burned a few too many times with these types of distros. I like things with a bit less manual maintenance. I don't want to parse release notes to make sure I have to fix something on my end or disable something before updating. It doesn't happen often, but sometimes it does, and if you don't read through things, you're gonna break stuff. It is still very good at what it tries to do, and that's why it is in the good category. Next, we have Fedora, and Fedora I will place in the great category. I don't use it anymore as my main distro, but it's one of the best desktop distributions out there, especially if you like vanilla GNOME. Their GNOME edition is basically the gold standard for how to run GNOME on a distro, but of course they now also have a full KDE edition too, which is treated just like the GNOME edition, which used to be the only flagship. They have plenty of spins for almost every desktop out there in a very nice vanilla form. Fedora is stable, it's fast, it's really up to date, it embraces the modern Linux stack, it is the poster boy for Wayland, Systemd, Flatpaks, all of that modern Linux stuff that a lot of distros are pivoting towards, and it does it extremely well. There are some concerns for me that they're starting to talk about adding AI features maybe, but they're looking at doing that optionally with an user opt-in, not opt-out, so I don't think it's too much of a problem, and I'll start ranting about this when they actually announce some stuff and if that stuff is actually egregious or not. For now though, I think Fedora is a really good pick. This is a distro I could see myself recommending to any newcomer to Linux. It's really good, so it's going in the great category. Now let's talk about Linux Mint. It is still one of the best distributions out there for everyone. It is a no frills, no bells and whistles distro. It is just efficient, it is simple to use, it is configurable, you've got all the graphical user interface you might want out of the box. It has a no-nonsense approach to an operating system. Things are in there because they are needed, because they are useful, not because they are the latest hyped thing, not because it's just the new thing that you need to have, or because of opinions. They just bring things when they're ready and when they have built them in a way that is suitable for them. In the end, it's not a distro I would use myself because I'm not the biggest fan of the Cinnamon desktop compared to KDE or GNOME, but it is still a fantastic system that I can recommend to everyone, and that's why it's going in the great category. It's a fantastic all-rounder. Now let's talk about Manjaro, and Manjaro is not a bad concept in itself. It's Arch, supposedly with a little bit more testing with the updates and just holding a few versions back to make sure that things aren't breaking all the time. The problem is the concept is not currently fully realized. There are too many blunders with that distro. It's not really more stable than Arch, it's often less stable because it seems either testing is lacking or they do keep shipping pre-release software as stable. There are tons of issues around the distro's management. This is even leading to some kind of mutiny in the community where they're trying to take control over from the current leadership, which is just not doing things properly in the views of the community. So Manjaro is going for now into the no thanks category, but I have solid hopes that if the community manages to either fork it or take control of it, they're going to be able to achieve much more because it feels that the current problems are linked to how the distro is managed, and with the community at the helm, I'm pretty confident it can regain its place as a very solid desktop distro. Now we have SteamOS, and SteamOS, we're going to look at it as a gaming distro specifically, and it is fantastic at what it does. Now, it is a bad desktop distro in my opinion. It's immutable without really many graphical user interfaces to alleviate the issues that an immutable distro has. It has an old KDE version, an old kernel. I don't think it's meant to be a desktop distro. You can use it as such, but I don't personally like it in that specific aspect. It can work, but it's not something I would seek out for myself. For a gaming device though, it is just the best. You've got updates straight from the gaming interface, you've got full controller support everywhere, you don't need to go to the desktop mode at all, it's just all there in the gaming mode. It's also really stable as well, it looks good, it's a great distro. And the only thing lacking is the fact that you can just download the ISO and install it anywhere, which as far as I can tell, they still haven't released. Maybe with the Steam machine we'll get it, but right now you only have super close clones of SteamOS, but you don't have the official SteamOS supported by Valve for more devices, and I do want to see that. It's still going in the great category because for gaming distros, on the hardware that it ships with is just fantastic. Now we need to talk about Bazzite. It's a new addition to the tier list I hadn't looked at last time, and now I tried it on my own gaming desktop, and it is a really nice distribution. It works really well. You have GNOME and KDE, so the major desktops if you want them. The immutable nature is sometimes annoying because things you would like to install aren't always available as Flatpaks or app images, but it's not too much of a problem with distro containers. It's fast, it is up to date, it is very stable. The only reason I did not stick with it on my gaming desktop is because I couldn't really get DaVinci Resolve working properly using DaVinci Box. I needed to install the Reactor plugin system, and in DaVinci Box I couldn't figure it out. I did figure it out afterwards, I just needed to add a package to the distro container. It's not Bazzite's fault, but in the meantime I moved on to something else. Bazzite is still a fantastic distro for gaming, and so it is going in the good category. Now we have Nobara, and that's another one I have been using for a while on that same gaming PC, and I placed it in good before, but I don't like it as much nowadays. I'm going to put it in average. My problems with it is that, yes, it is a solid distro, but it does pull updates from tons of different sources with its own graphical user interface, with scripts running to try and make sure fixes are coming and applied properly and doing things in the right order, and it makes it really slow to update the distro. At least it does on my gaming desktop. Updating that system was a pain, because I couldn't just update it from the gaming interface of Steam. Obviously it's not plugged in there, so since this desktop was plugged onto my TV and I only used it with a controller, I sometimes had to just whip out a keyboard and mouse and move to the desktop mode and launch the update, and it took like 35 minutes to update the entire system, where other distros would have just taken like 5 minutes tops. It was annoying to use, and I don't think it's well suited for a console approach, although as a desktop distro that's maybe not something you'll have as many problems with. I still think the updates are way too slow to be applied. Maybe it's just me, but I did not enjoy that. I also had a few crashes and problems when doing those updates, so in my experience Nobara is just not as good as something like Bazzite for gaming, so I'm going to put it in average. Now let's talk about Ubuntu. Last time I put it in good, and I will keep it there this time. It is not my favorite, and I hesitated with the average tier here. The focus on snaps is just not my thing. I don't like this packaging format. I think if you want to use a containerized application distribution system, Flatpaks are just better. They're what the entire Linux community is behind right now when they want to support these packaging formats at least. Ubuntu is just doing snaps on their own. Basically all other distros have said we don't really need that out of the box. It's just not my thing. But the distro now has focus. They seem to have an actual desktop that they're working on, bringing their own permission system, their own security center, their own app store, basically their own applications to handle stuff in Ubuntu. And while I don't like the focus on Snap specifically, it goes against everything else in the Linux world, I feel that Ubuntu is committed to this and they're actually making it better and better. So I can't fault them for doing that, even though I'm not a fan. I wouldn't use it nowadays. That's not the distro I would recommend either, but it's not bad. So I'm gonna leave it in good, but it's probably at the bottom of that tier, like maybe average, maybe good, because my own personal feelings on snaps have to be taken into consideration here. Now we have MX Linux. I tried it, I didn't quite see the interest for me personally. Using Debian Stable as a base isn't something I would want on a desktop distro myself, but they do update a ton of packages on top of that, so it's not too old. There's just nothing I really loved in here. It's not specifically fast, it's not specifically lightweight, but it's not bad either. It's just not something I would personally want to use, so it's going to stick to the average tier where I placed it last time, I think. It's not bad, I can see people using it, I can see why people love it, but it's just not for me personally. Now we have OpenSUSE Tumbleweed. It is a very good rolling release distro. It is very stable for a rolling release. It is very up to date. It has plenty of choices for the desktops you want to use. And now they have the nicer installer, which doesn't hurt because installing is the first step you take with a distro. When the installer is as bad as the old OpenSUSE installer, it just throws people off. The new one is much better while retaining most of the complex features that you might want. You also have a new nicer package manager. They're moving to Cockpit instead of the old YAST software, so it feels like they're keeping all the configurability and the graphical user interface for most things without having that super old GUI that YAST was, which also could throw people off because when you open that thing it was straight back to Windows 95. New stuff is good in that regard because it makes onboarding people a lot easier. Now, if I moved to a rolling release, it would probably be OpenSUSE Tumbleweed or maybe Slow Roll, which I didn't try specifically, but it's kind of the same thing, but with a little bit more delay on the package versions that you get. The only problem seems to be with the NVIDIA drivers. Apparently, they're not as well supported. I haven't really encountered problems with it, but apparently they're a bit more annoying to configure on OpenSUSE than on other distros. I'm gonna put Tumbleweed in the good category. Now for OpenSUSE Leap, that's the stable version, and right now I don't like it quite as much. It's just too old for me. It's not one of those things that get a 6-month update cycle like Fedora. It sticks to much older versions, and for a desktop that just doesn't work for me. I want the latest versions of the desktop environment that I use. I don't need that extreme stability sticking to something that will be 2-3 years old. It's not for me. They did replace all the old things, the old installer, the YAST tool is being replaced as well, but you're still stuck on very old desktop versions, and I don't really like that. You've got an old version of Plasma, you've got GNOME 48 in there. They aren't acceptable desktops for me in 2026 when GNOME 50 and Plasma 6.6 just came out. So I'm going to put it in average. For people who want something tried and true, very tested, it's good, but for me personally, I can't see myself using it really. Now we have Debian Stable. It's another one that I could place in no thanks or in good. I don't use Debian Stable on a desktop, I use it on a server. And on a server, I like it a lot. But on a desktop, I don't really think it makes sense. It's just too damn old, even though it's no longer a problem for the applications, because you can always get a Flatpak, an app image, whatever you want. The desktop environment you use is very old on Debian Stable, and that's just not something I enjoy on my desktop distro. I can't see myself using a Linux desktop that is more than 6 months old, and with Debian Stable it gets much older than that as time goes on. So I'll still put it in good, because the distro does what it sets out to do, but I would never use it myself or recommend it on a desktop. For others, it will be the reason they picked Debian Stable specifically, but it's not for me. So I'll put it in good. I'm cheating a little bit. I'm putting it in good because on servers it's really good. I understand why people would want to use it if they really want something that will just never break, but for me personally, that's not something I would use. Now let's talk about NixOS. It's another distro I love the concept of, but it doesn't really work for me in practice. A declarative system is on paper awesome. One file that lets you remake your entire system when you need it, and that your system is always built from what you declared in that file, that's kind of awesome. But it's not really useful to me. I don't reinstall my systems often, I don't redeploy things on other computers often. I don't really care about this feature. When I need to reinstall every year or every 2 years, or when I need to set up a new device every year or every 2 years, I just spend the 30 minutes copying things and reinstalling things I need. I don't really need a config file specifically for my desktop. Now for a server or things like that, yeah, sure, but for a desktop, it's just not something I need. The Nix package manager works really well, and it's nice as a concept. There's a lot of stuff in there that is really good. But if every time I want to do something, I have to go into a config file, it just doesn't really work for me. I need simple, basic stuff with graphical user interfaces. That's what I like using. And NixOS just adds a layer of complexity that I like, but I don't enjoy the benefits of. So it's going to go in average for me, but I totally understand why people would place it much higher on their own tier lists. Now we have Asahi Linux. I do own an M1 MacBook Pro that I never use, and if I wanted to use it, I would probably run Fedora Asahi, not Asahi Linux. The work they do is incredible, but it's not keeping up really with the new versions of Macs that are being released. And it will likely never be able to really catch up because Apple doesn't document anything publicly. So it is a wonder, and it is nothing short of technical wizardry that they manage to support as much as they do. But the distro itself, and Fedora Asahi as well, they're more proofs of concept than something I could see myself daily driving. On my M1 Pro MacBook Pro, a device that is a few years old now, there's no Thunderbolt support, there's no support for the dedicated hardware that handles video decoding and encoding, there's no support for Touch ID, and the webcam and mic just got support. It's very recent. Before that, you couldn't use them at all. It's usable, but it's on one of the oldest models. Newer ones have worse support. I can't say I want to use it. At the same time, if I only had that M1 Pro MacBook Pro, I would likely just use Fedora Asahi on it because I wouldn't really have a choice. It's hard to place. Ultimately, I don't really like those Macs on the hardware side. I can't see myself using that as a daily driver, and the distro that runs it isn't quite finished yet, so I'm gonna put it in no thanks. I do recognize the insane amount of work that is being poured into this. This is fantastic, but it's just too hard to catch up on undocumented hardware. Now we have KDE Neon, and it's just not something that works for me anymore. It's an old LTS base with rolling updates to the KDE desktop, but there's just not enough people working on it to make it work properly. It crashes, it has tons of bugs that can't really be fixed because there aren't enough people working on it. The community seems to be moving to KDE Linux, mostly, not really to KDE Neon. And while KDE Linux isn't in the tier list yet because it's a bit too early, I think it's clear Neon doesn't seem to have that much of a future as a project for a main desktop. For testing purposes, sure, but it seems to be maintained by very few people, and I wouldn't really rely on that for my day-to-day operations. So I'm gonna put it in hell no, that's just not something I could see myself running or recommending. Now we have Zorin OS. It was in the no thanks category before, but that was probably a mistake on my part. I'm slowly realizing why Zorin OS is actually pretty good and why it is getting so many downloads recently. Now, I would recommend Mint over it, probably to a newcomer, but for some people, Mint looks dated. It looks a bit bad. It looks a bit old in its look and feel, in its theme, in its approach to applications. And Fedora might look a bit too weird with Vanilla GNOME, because Fedora is a distro I would recommend too. But Vanilla GNOME isn't for everyone. Zorin OS looks much more familiar to a lot of people, and that's the use case for it. It's clearly identified. It's people who want some amount of flashiness and good looks, plus all the graphical user interfaces they can get, plus a simple guided experience that is relatively familiar, at least on the surface, thanks to desktop layouts. Zorin OS isn't the fastest distro, it is pretty old in its base and its GNOME version, but it's solid, it's tested, it's stable, they do update a bunch of stuff as time goes on, it is easy to onboard new users, so I am going to place it in the good category because it's a very good distro for people who want to start with Linux, but don't really like the look of Vanilla GNOME in Fedora or the look of Mint. Zorin OS is here to plug that gap, and I think it does it well. Now we have Gentoo, and Gentoo is super cool, but I am never using it though. It's a thing I can play around with when I want to have fun, compiling stuff and learning about flags and just trying something different, and yes, I think this is fun to do. But as a day-to-day device, compiling software every time I want to install something, there's no way, and using the pre-made packages, the binaries that they distribute, then what's the point? I might as well just use another distro instead that just has those binary packages. So I love the concept of it, I think it's fantastic to learn how you handle software, but it's definitely never going to get installed on my own computer, and so that's going into the hell no category. Now we're gonna talk about Tuxedo OS. This is the one I use. I will place it in good, but not in great, because I run that distro on Tuxedo PCs. Tuxedo OS is the distro made by the manufacturer called Tuxedo, which is a very regular sponsor of the channel. Although they didn't pay me to place it higher or anything, they don't pay me to talk about Tuxedo OS. They sponsor me to talk about their hardware, which we'll do at the end. I do use their PCs, and Tuxedo OS on their PCs is really good. but I don't really know how well it works on other computers. Theoretically, it should be fine. It's Ubuntu LTS plus a semi-rolling KDE desktop. They don't update it the day Plasma releases. They wait for a month and a half, maybe 2 months, but you do get those versions when they're well tested and bugs are fixed. They also bring in newer drivers, their own kernel versions for more patches, basically sort of what PopOS does, but they don't have their own desktop, they use KDE. I love Tuxedo OS. It never crashes on me, it has no bugs that I cannot trace back straight to the desktop itself that I use or to the software running on that desktop. It is updated often enough, a bit slower than other distros, but you don't have to wait 6 months for a new KDE version. And the Tuxedo Control Center that you get on Tuxedo PCs brings a bunch of stuff that honestly should be in every desktop environment on Linux by default. Power profiles that you can create and customize graphically, setting charging limits, switching to the discrete or integrated GPU graphically, function keys lock, webcam tuning, keyboard backlight options and colors, all of that stuff. These advantages don't exist on computers that are made by Tuxedo. The control center only works on their own devices, which is why Tuxedo OS is only in good and not in great, because all those advantages, they're not necessarily here for everyone. I still think it's a really good distro. It's maybe not the one I would recommend to everyone, but I think it's really solid. Also, they only use KDE. The version of GNOME that you can get on that is the one in Ubuntu LTS repos, which is a pretty old version, so that's another knock against it. Now we have Solus. I'm still not really interested in Solus personally. What's really the advantage of using Solus? It's a rolling release, but it's not as plentiful in its packages as Arch. It's not updated as fast as Arch. They have their own package repos, but they're not stocked as well as Arch's or the AUR. Potentially it could be more stable than Arch, but it's a much smaller community, so maybe not. Budgie is a desktop I don't quite rate highly right now either, because most other options do what it currently does better or faster in my opinion, so Solus doesn't really have a main hook for me right now. I'm not saying it's bad at all, but I don't really see the use case for it for my own needs, and so it's going to go in no thanks as well. Now we have Deepin. Deepin, I don't like the desktop, I don't like the old base they use, I don't like their attempts at sort of doing Flatpak all over again, because Liniapps seem to be basically that, or at least it's so inspired by Flatpak that it could maybe be a fork. I don't like their badly stacked repos with old versions of apps. I don't see any reason to run Deepin as a distribution. The desktop, if you like it, run it on another distro that has more up-to-date internals and better software repos. But the Deepin distro? No, it's going in hell no. Now this year I also tried Endeavour OS, and I'll be honest, I kinda like it. It's Arch, but with a friendly graphical user interface to install it, which Arch kinda has nowadays. It's a terminal user interface, but it works. It's really close to Arch as well, so everything you know and you find online about Arch works on Endeavour. It's also a very basic state distro. You do bring what you want in there, but the default is very bare bones on purpose, which I kinda like as a concept. All the desktops are in there too, with minimal changes to the defaults, apart from a basic color scheme, which I also like. They seem to have tweaked XFCE a bit more than others, but generally they seem to stick to mostly vanilla plus a few accent colors, and I like that. It's not something I will use myself, because Arch-based systems tend to not live really long on my devices. I don't know what I'm doing, but every time I start installing something from the AUR, it just breaks down every single time. It's just not something I appreciate all that much, but it feels like a very solid distro, and in my time with it, I quite enjoyed it, so I'm gonna place it in good. And that's all the distros I have had experience with. You might have noticed that one is missing, which is KDE OS. I know everyone wants to know what I think about KDE OS, or maybe not everyone. Maybe 3 people want to know about that. I will review it on the channel relatively soon. I will take a look at it. I'll try to make maybe a performance comparison to see how the optimizations work with that and how well they improve performance actually for stuff like gaming maybe. So we'll take a look at that really soon, and of course it will appear in the next tier list, probably next year, because I don't do these too often. Anyway, those are my rankings personally based on my use case, which is a desktop distro that when I turn on my computer, I apply the updates, it works, I don't have to double check anything, nothing breaks specifically that is unexpected, I can do my work, so that's my use case. I want graphical user interfaces all around, I want basic versions of desktop that I can tweak myself if I want to, I want a solid repo system, and I want control over how the system works. That's my own use case. Obviously, everyone will have their own tier list, their own rankings, and you're welcome to let me know about those in the comments, obviously as a polite thing. If I placed your favorite distro lower than you would expect, it's not a knock against them. I don't hate any of those distros, it's just that they don't work for me if I didn't rank them highly. Anyway, this will conclude this video. I'll leave you in the capable hands of myself telling you about our sponsor, Tuxedo Computers. So Tuxedo makes hardware that ships with Linux pre-installed. They're based in Germany, but they ship to most countries in the world, and they have laptops, desktops from all price points, all specs. You can have affordable laptops as entry points, you can have high-end gaming laptops, gaming PCs, workstations, you name it. They have something for everyone. You also have a lot of agency on the hardware that is inside, on the logo engraved on the lid of your laptop, on the keyboard layout that you want. They're really, really good. They pre-install with their distro or Ubuntu, but of course you can just slap any distro on them. You also have repos that they have to let you install little fixes and little support things to make sure that, for example, the keyboard backlight color can be changed, or the light bars that some PCs have can be supported as well. They're really solid. I only use their PCs nowadays, and I can only recommend them. So click the link down in the description if you want to learn more for your next PC if you need a new one. Anyway, this will conclude today's video. I hope you enjoyed watching it or listening to it. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Click all the usual YouTube buttons. Do check the links in the description to support the show as well. And in the meantime, I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!